On Tuesday, Juan Soto was a subject of much debate as his comments about Aaron Judge and lineup protection became a story in a way that would only happen in New York, and in doing so, he's never been more a New York Met.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, we have a Mets loss to discuss. There's also going to be plenty of roster moves made today on Wednesday that we need to get into to close out the show. But first and foremost, I want to talk about the most talked about story in New York on Tuesday when it came to the New York Mets, or just sports in general, and that is the scathing story in the New York Post about Juan Soto and how he so dearly misses Aaron Judge. At least that's what you'd be led to believe if you listen to the talking heads on sports talk radio, or if you overreacted on social media to a couple of quotes, or really one quote, which is where Juan Soto told Mike Puma of the New York Post, "It's definitely different. I had the best hitter in baseball hitting behind me. I was getting more attacked and more pitches were in the strike zone, less intentional walks and things like that. I was pitched differently last year." And everybody had a reaction. Oh my God, can you believe he said that when Pete Alonso is on fire behind him? What, Pete's not as good as Aaron Judge? Well, I'll tell you what, as great as Pete Alonso is, as much as I am as big of a Pete Alonso fan as anyone, I'm wearing a polar bear Pete Alonso shirt right now. But am I delusional enough to say that Pete Alonso is the same type of hitter as two-time MVP Aaron Judge? No. And if you read through this story, which just so happened to be on the New York Post Plus, so you have to have a subscription to read it. So I'm sure a lot of people just didn't get behind that paywall to actually read the full story. You can have a real reaction to this one. But there's nothing here if you read the story. Juan Soto was asked the question, hey, you think you're getting pitched a little bit differently than you were last year? And Soto made the mistake, I guess, of answering the question honestly. And that's what frustrates me so much at times about how these guys are covered, because you encourage them to answer questions in the most vanilla, nothing way, because if they're honest, they make headlines in the wrong way. I'll give you a perfect example of this. Kobe Mayo was sent down to AAA to start the season. He had a horrible spring training. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. He is one of the top prospects in baseball. He has done everything you need to do in AAA to be in the big leagues. He's had incredible numbers at Norfolk, but he had a bad spring, so he didn't make the team. And he was asked about it, and he answered the question honestly. What did he say? He talked about how it puts him in a sort of a lose-lose situation because he goes down, and if he puts up the numbers in AAA like he has previously, you're doing what you're supposed to do. But if you struggle, well, now it's a story. So he was just honest about a rough situation that he was going into. But he also had owned the fact that he didn't play well enough to make the team. But no one takes the part of it of him owning that it's his own fault that he's going back down. But he just was honest about the frustrations of going back down. And then he gets crucified for it. Juan Soto answered the question honestly, and then he went on and said, I would say I'm getting a decent amount of strikes, but there's some specific situations where pitchers don't attack. And then the article says, but Soto's success as a hitter is predicated upon plate discipline, and he isn't about to stray away from that approach. He continues to say, I feel like I'm trying to be the same, do damage when I can, and whenever they want to attack me, I take my chances. When they don't, I just take my walk, Soto said. I am not trying to be selfish or anything and try to hit homers every time. I'm just trying to take my pitches, take my swings whenever I can, And when they don't want to, I pass the baton to my teammates. And then later on, he even says, everybody has got a role. And I feel as a team, we've got to attack pitchers as a team. This guy's being painted as a me first guy or a guy that's missing Aaron Judge in the protection. No, he answered the question honestly. He says, we don't have to attack the pitchers as individuals. If they don't want to pitch to me, I just pass the baton and let Alonso do his thing. If they don't want to pitch to him, he should do the same thing. What is wrong with any of that? Do you really think that Pete Alonso is so thin-skinned that he's going to take it as some slight that Juan Soto says he's getting pitched differently when it's Alonso behind him than Aaron Judge? It's a fact. It's not an opinion. It's not him saying he misses Aaron Judge. He was asked the question, and he answered honestly. If Aaron Judge is standing on deck, they're not going to intentionally walk Juan Soto. Even as good as Pete Alonso has been, I think it was the Twins, but if not, it was the A's. It was either one of the last two games. They still made the decision to intentionally walk Juan Soto because he is a more feared and complete hitter than Pete Alonso. Now, right at this very moment, Pete Alonso this year has certainly been the more complete hitter, but going on track record, they still thought that they could exploit some holes in Alonso's swing and get a strikeout, so they went against Pete. And that's going to be true, and that's okay. And that's why Juan Soto stretched to ownership and everyone else that he wanted the Mets to bring back Pete Alonso so he had the protection in the lineup. Because guess what? It's not about him having protection to get his numbers. It's about having somebody on deck that can come through if they pitch around him. And Pete Alonso's doing that, so there's no problem. The Mets are winning games. Juan Soto answered the question. That's all he did. And then people had to have their opinions on it. You know what? Because of the way that this story got overblown, Juan Soto has never been more a New York Met. Because I could be wrong, and it might just be because I'm in the Mets prism and this is my focus and I'm not really paying as close attention to the Yankees. But I don't feel like there are these Yankee stories that get overblown in this way. But Mike Puma knew what he was trying to get to. He knew what he wanted to write. It was a leading question. He wanted to get a story up on Post Plus that had some type of sentiment of not having Aaron Judge behind me is why my numbers aren't as good. Now, all he did was answer the question. Because you know what? Yes, Juan Soto had the best season of his career with Aaron Judge hitting behind him. But he still chose the New York Mets because he thinks the New York Mets as a team have a better outlook for his prime. So if he was a selfish guy in some respects, he would have gone back to the Yankees. Or maybe not selfish. Maybe that's not the right conclusion to come to. But more so, if he was all about him and not all about winning, maybe he would have gone back to the Yankees so that he would have Aaron Judge behind him and he would be able to put up maybe a little bit better numbers than he might in a Mets uniform. And he might have, to go back and hit at Yankee Stadium with the short porch. But no, he looked at the Mets as a team and said, this is where I want to play. This is where I think I can win. And this is where my family's going to be the most comfortable. And he is a Met for the next 15 years. And the Yankees fans who want to keep crying about it can. That's fine. Nothing's going to change it. And so, sure, right now, he has not gotten off to the start that you would have hoped. He's still doing his thing. He's still a productive member of this team. And now he's homering in back-to-back games. And maybe he needed this crazy distraction for a day to just focus him in on the fact that he's still Juan Soto and he's going to be just fine. I also like to point out, as many have, that he has been a slow starter in his career. The only month for his career where his OPS is under 900 is March and April, which obviously they combine together when you're looking at stats. Every other month throughout his career, his OPS is over 900. A lot of times over 950. In 2023, season with the Padres, he hit 203, 373, 384 in the month of March and April combined, with 5 home runs, 11 RBIs. In May, he hit 333, 482, 632. That's getting on base at a near 500 clip and slugging over 600. So Juan Soto is going to be just fine. He is going to get hot. And really the way I would look at it is the fact that he hasn't gone off yet. And the Mets are sitting at, what are they, 11-6 now? I think it's 11-6 through 17. That's just indicative of a team that can still take it to another level, because even if Pete Alonso comes back to earth a little bit, you have two superstars in front of him in the lineup that absolutely have another degree, if not multiple degrees higher, that they can raise their play, and they will eventually raise their play, and they can pick up the slack when Pete falls back. And he has two guys behind him in Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos, who I also feel confident are going to be much better hitters than they've been so far this season. So yes, the Mets lineup hasn't hit its stride, but trust me, at some point it will. The next segment, though, I'm going to talk about another frustrating offensive game, as the Mets did lose on Tuesday night, as their series against the Twins went even. I'm going to break down that game in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball and hockey playoffs are heating up. There's no better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than with Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on at least two player projections and you're in. You can even combine players across sports, basketball, hockey, baseball, and more, for your chance to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Today, I'm looking at the NBA. I got Zach LaVine's three-pointers, 3.5. So I think that he's going to hit more than that in this projection for the game. Tyler Hero projected at 1.5 threes, taking more there. And you know what? I wanted to throw in a little Met action. So Juan Soto's fantasy score is 7.5 points. We took more on that to create my lineup. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We are well within 100 subscribers away from getting to our goal of 13,000 subs. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk about this loss from the Mets on Tuesday night. The guy that has been hitting continued to hit. Pete Alonso got the Mets on the board early with a solo homer in the first inning, but the lineup continued to struggle besides him. Only Met in the lineup with multiple hits in this game was Pete Alonso, and they got 7 hits overall and just 1 walk. Francisco Lindor had a pretty rough game, left a lot of runners on base, and made a critical error in the third inning, preventing Tyler McNeil from escaping a jam. McNeil had 2 scoreless innings in the books. He allowed 2 hits in that third inning, one of them an infield hit, which is a really weird ball that I took it's kind of a looping flare in front of Luis Acuna that bounced, and he kind of made a really nice play to barehand it and try to get Harrison Bader out at first, but to no avail. Bader made it with the infield hit. I think the other hit was Byron Buxton in that inning, and then there was a line out and a bunt pop out that left Tyler McGill 1 out away from getting out of the jam, and he got a ground ball to the Gold Glover Francisco Lindor, and for some reason this season, he just keeps making errors. His 4th of the year, and the other ones that he didn't field cleanly, the other ground balls in Miami, if I'm not mistaken, those took some weird hops. Not to say that he shouldn't have made the play. He'll tell you that he should have, but they did take some funky bounces. I mean, this one just ate him up for no reason. It was a really weird play. He's going to be fine. He's still Francisco Lindor. He's going to figure it out. And if I remember correctly, after making those 2 errors in Miami, his next game, he was outstanding defensively. So I'm sure he'll sharpen it up and have a good game to close out this series. But that was definitely a critical error because then Tyler McGill gave up a base hit that allowed a second run to score, a run scored on the error, and then another run scored after that was unearned because McGill should have been out of the inning. Tyrone Taylor, though, did make a great throw to get McGill out of the jam, to get a runner out at third base and end things before he had to face another batter and potentially give up more runs. Now, Juan Soto in the 4th inning tied it up with a solo homer. I made a point yesterday with Juan Soto's home run to mention that it was put on a tee, center cut. And I remember I did see a comment about that, about, why are you mentioning it? And the reason why I mention it is because Juan Soto is the type of hitter that doesn't just hit mistakes out. And I thought the pitch that he hit out today, which was a changeup blowing in, maybe you want to get that pitch a little bit lower, but it wasn't really a bad pitch. Juan Soto was just all over it. And that's the sign of when he's coming out of it. When he starts to hit the pitches on the corners out, that's when you know that he's starting to potentially get into a rhythm. I really think if we're going to play pop psychologist, there might be a little bit of Juan Soto pressing because there's the contract to live up to, or it's just a new team, a new environment. There's also probably the fact that, like he mentioned, he is the guy in the lineup that they don't want to beat you, right? Last year, he got off to a great start with the Yankees, but he wasn't that guy in that lineup. So this year, it's a little bit of an adjustment, and I really just think it's a guy that isn't quite feeling right, but I don't think it's indicative of anything that's going to be a prolonged struggle. And I think the homers in the last two games kind of show that. He's going to get his. It's just a matter of time. And at some point soon, we're going to get the type of game where Juan Soto just wins it himself, where he goes 3 for 4 with a home run, a bases clearing double. And that's the other thing. If the Mets can load the bases for him, they'll have nowhere to put him. So we'll see if he gets any of those opportunities. But overall, I think we're starting to see a little bit more confidence in Juan Soto, and hopefully that results in some more success moving forward. But from that point, the Mets offense pretty much stalled against Bailey Ober until the 7th inning. Meanwhile, McGill gave up another run in the 4th, hit the leadoff man, then gave up what looked like a 2-run homer, but was overturned on replay review. Harrison Bader got an infield hit that scored a run, but then McGill got a double play ball to get out of it. A great turn by Acuna and Lindor. Acuna had a really nice game. Continues to show that he should be the Mets second baseman until Jeff McNeil comes back. And as I talked about on yesterday's show, then you should start to see some real time in center field. 5th inning, leadoff single for the Twins. Byron Buxton then stole second, advanced to third on a ground out, and scored on a ground ball hit to Acuna, where Acuna did nothing wrong. Terrens didn't get the tag on him, but really it was just a great play by Buxton, who was going on contact and had the perfect dive to the back corner of home plate and was just able to evade the tag. That resulted in another run. So Tyler McGill ends up seeing 4 runs come across when he's on the mound, 2 of them earned, but I don't think he really pitched bad. Ultimately, he just had some bad luck in this one. He didn't walk anyone. I thought that was always a good sign. If McGill is getting himself into trouble, and granted, he did hit a batter, so that's just as bad as a walk, but I thought overall it was just a day where those couple things went against him, and that's going to happen. These guys are not going to pitch to sub-2 ERAs all year. Although because of the unearned runs, McGill is still sitting at, I believe, 1.60 through, 4 starts now? So pretty good start to the season for him. Again, Bailey Ober was good on the other side, and the Mets just couldn't get anything going. 7th inning, they started to. Mark Vientos got a 1-out base hit. Luis Terrens hit a double. That meant the end of the day for Ober. Jesse Winker hit a sac fly off of reliever Cole Sands. Luis Acuna drew a walk that put the tying runs on base for Lindor, and he came up with an opportunity to potentially get the Mets right back in the game. Hit one hard, but right at the second baseman, and that ended any threat the Mets had. 8th inning, Pete Alonso doubled, I believe it was with 1 out. Mets stranded him. 9th inning, Mark Vientos reached on an error. After a pair of groundouts, Luis Acuna extended the inning with the base hit that brought Lindor up again with an opportunity with the tying runs on base. He just couldn't get the job done, ends up striking out to end the game. So rough day, of course, for Lindor. Juan Soto has a home run. Good day for him. Pete Alonso, great day. 2 hits, homer. But the Mets lineup still not quite where you want it to be. With that said, got a chance here to win a series still and make it 5 straight series victories. And they will have a lot of question marks about how this game will be played because Griffin Canning has been scratched. And that leaves a lot of room for questions on, for one, how Justin Hageman's going to do in either a starting role or bulk relief. And also, what's going to be the series of roster moves that are about to unfold. I want to tell you all what is in store for the day in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of ballpark food, and if you're looking to go last minute, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. With last-minute deals, all-in pricing, and a lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as game time gets closer, meaning you can score an incredible deal When I go to games, I'm not buying tickets until I'm walking into the ballpark. Then I say, all right, let's pull open the app. Let's scan the seat map. Let's find the best possible deals, and I can get tickets in a matter of seconds. It's so easy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets Insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, we are 17 games into the season. Why is that notable? Because through 17 games, the only roster move, if you can even call it one, was pretty much on opening day, or I guess hours before it, DFAing Alex Canario. That's it. So really, the opening day roster has not changed a single bit. That is remarkable in today's game with the amount of injuries and the amount of bullpen turnover that we see. The fact that this team was able to avoid any roster moves up to this point has been something very noteworthy. It's part of why they've gotten off to a great start. Now, granted, we got the news yesterday that Jose Siri is out for probably a long time with a fractured tibia. So that was the first domino to fall. The second one is Griffin Canning got sick. Now, why are those two things connected? It's pretty interesting because the Mets could have gotten an outfielder up there. They could have had Jose Azocar on the bench in Minnesota for the game, and they decided to keep Jose Siri. Why did they do that? What's going on? Well, turns out the Mets are able to legally manipulate their roster a little bit to get Hageman up and use Jose Siri's injury to get him down and have the pitcher that is going to be the corresponding move for Hageman remain with the team, because there is a rule, and Anthony DiComo breaks this down in an article for MLB.com, where basically Major League rules state that optional assignments for pitchers must last 15 days unless a player is recalled as a result of someone else going on the IL. Now, I would have assumed that to take advantage of that rule, it has to be, okay, a pitcher got hurt, a pitcher's coming back. But apparently that's not the case. So what does that mean? Well, you saw Max Kranick go out there and pitch and get 5 outs and give up a homer, first run he allowed all year. He's going to go down, technically, on Wednesday to make room for Justin Hageman. Kranick is on the Mets 40-man roster and still has an option, so he can be moved up and down wherever the Mets see fit. They have 5 options they can use throughout the year. This is the first one. The way he's pitching, they probably won't have to use many of the other ones, but he is a flexible piece in this bullpen, unlike someone like Danny Young, who's out of options. So Kranick is the casualty, but it's only for a day. Hageman comes up, he pitches. The next day, Hageman goes down, but not before Jose Siri goes on the IL. And the corresponding move for Jose Siri going on the IL is Max Kranick coming back. Then, because the Mets would have too many pitchers, Hageman goes down, and the Mets call up a position player to take that spot. That's what's going to happen here. And it's genius. It allows the Mets to get a spot starter up without having to worry about losing Max Kranick for 2 weeks, because the bullpen is much better if Kranick is in it. So they would have either had to have done that, or they'd have to DFA Danny Young. Now you don't have to worry about that. So that is a really good way to navigate a tricky situation. Griffin Canning got sick, so he couldn't make a start on Wednesday. Now all of that discussion that I've had this week about the Mets maybe going with the bullpen game, it's all a moot point, because now that bullpen game, so to speak, is going to happen on Wednesday. There are some rumblings the Mets might choose to go with an opener before Justin Hageman pitches. So you might see maybe it's Reed Garrett face the top of the Twins lineup. Maybe he gets 3 outs. Maybe they decide to extend and have him get maybe the first 5 outs. And then they go to Justin Hageman to start off with the middle or the bottom of that Twins lineup for some bulk relief. And hopefully he can get the Mets 9 outs at least. Best case, maybe it's 12 outs. And they just try to see where the game takes them. So it's going to be a tough game to win because Justin Hageman is a real wild card. This is a guy that was not pitching particularly well in Syracuse. He was just the only arm available for a Wednesday start. Brandon Waddle has been pitching better, but he pitched, I think, over the weekend. I think either Saturday or Sunday. So he wasn't able to go. Brandon Sproat, Blade Tidwell, they weren't available to go. So this was really the only option. Hageman, again, has not pitched in the big leagues before. So we'll see what he looks like. Apparently he has a 4-pitch mix that can get guys out, but it wasn't quite working in Syracuse. We'll see if it works a little bit better against the Twins. You never know what can happen in these types of games. It could be anyone getting outs at any time. I really don't know. It's going to be an interesting game, and if you're going to win one of these games, you got to hit. And the Mets are going up against, is it David Festa of the Twins, or is it Matt Festa? I had it right. David Festa. David Festa, who, as I talked about in the series preview, had a nice season last year overall, just as a rookie. It was he didn't sink, I guess you could say. He didn't pitch particularly great, but a 4.90 ERA in your first taste of the big leagues, not horrible. This year, he's made 1 start, did not allow a run in 4 2/3 innings pitch. 3 hits. Well, actually allowed a run, but it was unearned. 3 hits, 1 hit batter, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. So we'll see if the Mets can get on the 25-year-old right-hander, and we'll see how the bullpen and Justin Hageman holds up as the Mets again try to win their 5th consecutive series. Now, once that ends, again, you'll see Hageman go down. Maybe it is Azúcar that comes up to be the outfielder, and Kranick, of course, after his 1 day down, will be inserted right back into that bullpen. The Mets will open up their series against the Cardinals at home on Thursday. David Peterson will likely pitch on 4 days rest. That allows Kodai Senga to then pitch on Friday on an extra day's rest, or his typical 5 days rest. And then your rotation goes from there. I think if I'm correct on this, I believe then that sets up Peterson to be able to pitch on regular rest again, I think, and then they don't need another 6th starter. So let me do the math on this real quick. Apologies that I didn't do it beforehand, but if Peterson's starting on the 17th, he'll have the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st off. He can pitch on the 22nd. Actually, no, with that in mind, Kodai Senga, they are going to run into this again now with Kodai Senga pitching on Friday. Well, actually, no, I'm missing a key component of this. Griffin Canning starts to get inserted back into this rotation. So my assumption actually would be Peterson on Thursday, Canning on Friday, and then Senga on Saturday, and then Canning and Peterson would pitch on regular rest before the off day, and then you don't have to worry about that 6th starter until the 30th. All right, I got that all squared away. Last bit of news to touch on before we close out the show, your daily updates on Francisco Alvarez and Jeff McNeil. Alvarez, a little bit of a mixed bag, had a great game in AA. Homered in his 2nd at-bat, got a single in his 3rd at-bat, went 2 for 3. Then his 4th at-bat, he gets hit in the same hand that he broke. Now, he went back out and caught the following half inning. Then he was pulled in the 7th inning. Now, was he just pulled because he had already caught 6, he'd already gotten 3 at-bats, or is there something else there? We still don't know. We haven't seen any reports on it. I will say that he can't break the hamate bone again. Okay, that is a bone that guys break, and then they have surgery, they remove the bone, and then it's just healing from that procedure, and then you never can break that bone again. But still, he got hit in the same hand. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, he maybe gets a day off and then gets right back onto the rehab assignment in AA, and nothing comes of this. But that is definitely a story we'll have to monitor, and I will keep you up to date on it as we get more information. Meanwhile, Jeff McNeil continued his rehab in Port St. Lucie. Went 1 for 3 on Tuesday with 2 walks. Played 7 innings at second base. So he has yet to play a full game, but had a pretty good day at the plate. I think the whole lineup, I think they scored like 17 runs on 14 hits. It was a wild game. But Jeff McNeil, still trending in the right direction. The plan was for him to play on Tuesday, get a day off on Wednesday, play on Thursday, and then potentially head up to Syracuse over the weekend. All goes well there. You never know. Maybe Jeff McNeil is back in the lineup on Monday against the Phillies. I would say that is the earliest possible return for McNeil. If not, maybe they wait for the road trip, which is really just a series in D.C. before they're back home against the Diamondbacks. But I am sure McNeil will be back by the end of the month. And I'd imagine if this was not a setback for Francisco Alvarez and his hand's feeling completely fine and they just pulled him to get him off his feet after 7 innings caught, or I think was it pulled him to 7, maybe 6 innings caught, I think he'd probably be back by the end of the month as well. And then the Mets would have to make their next roster move, whether that is to, obviously the one for Alvarez is simple. Sanger is going to go down. But for McNeil, that'll leave its own question marks on who will go down. Will it be whoever comes up for Siri, or should I say comes up for Hageman, whether that is Jose Azocar or another outfielder, or if they decide to just stick with an outfield that is Nimmo, Soto, Jeff McNeil able to play either corner, Jesse Winker and Starling Marte able to play either corner, and Luis Angel Acuna as the other center fielder on the roster, with Nimmo always able to shift out there in a pinch as well. We'll see. That would all be to keep Brett Baty on the big league roster. I don't know if that is really worth it, but you never know what the Mets will decide to do when that time comes. But I'll be covering it all the way through these rehab process, and once rehab processes and once they actually get back on the big league roster. For now, though, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. I am going to be going live after the day game today, as Chris has a day job where he can't quite go live either some of these day games for the Mets. Chris, of course, is Chris Schubert, who hosts the Locked On Mets postcast. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is a post-game stream that happens after every single Mets game. When Chris hosts, it'll be labeled postcast. Today, when I'm hosting, it's just going to look like our typical episode of Locked On Mets, but it'll be likely a 2-segment show, and I will still give you your full show on Thursday morning, breaking down probably what lies ahead against the Cardinals. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.